Now, some people use spirituality, on the other hand, as a way of not dealing with emotional issues.
Totally.
They go into these wonderful states on the meditation cushion, and they talk about God and heaven and the true self, but really they're quite disconnected from themselves because they haven't done the emotional work.
Gabby Bernstein, a role model for spiritual seekers.
You are acknowledging the spiritual practice, and I think that a lot of my listeners may not know this, but maybe they have been spiritually bypassing for a long time because that's all they knew how to do. That was another form of protection. And when we start to get more integrated in our therapeutic journey, the two can really coexist and support. And interestingly, I've personally been guided to many therapy practices that I believe are really spiritual practices. I can say that for Dick Schwartz. Yeah. So I'd love to hear where that L intersects for you and what that means to you.
Well, behind my left shoulder is a bookshelf. You can kind of see it, and that's a whole shelf full of spiritual books, which testifies to my own spiritual poverty. Because whenever I run into a crisis, I go out and buy a whole bunch more spiritual books, which then I don't necessarily read or read only very cursively. I've not been somebody with a disciplined spiritual practice. No, and reading your book, Happy Days, I also don't have the faith that you have, I mean, I can only call it that. You really do pray and you call to a higher power that really speaks to you, So for me, it's been the other way around. My journey started more with necessarily with working on my traumas and the traumas of my patients and all that manifested in all kinds of illnesses of mind and body. And it was only later that I was guided to spiritual work. And I've never been with my ADD personality, I've never been very disciplined about spiritual practice. So it's almost like spirituality is something that's kind of descended upon me willy-nilly, but not because I've done a 10-day Vipassana meditation, I've done other retreats, it's not like I haven't, but in terms of daily practice, it's really been missing from my life. I haven't pursued it. And so it's more that I have to keep coming back to it when I find that all the emotional and therapeutic work just leaves something missing, and what's missing, of course, is the deep connection to the capital S self that Dick Schwartz would call it, or the authentic self that I call it, or other people call it. So for me, it hasn't been. Now, some people use spirituality, on the other hand, as a way of not dealing with emotional issues.
Totally.
They go into these wonderful states on the meditation cushion, and they talk about God and heaven and the true self, but really they're quite disconnected from themselves because they haven't done the emotional work.
That was me for a long time. And I was teaching from that place and teaching well, well, and helping people create a spiritual connection and strengthening my own faith, but definitely using my spiritual practice as a protector part to avoid the impermissible.
Well, so that's what's interesting in spiritual practice is that they're great spiritual leaders who've taught millions, who've been exploiting and abusing their followers, which as gets revealed years later, this happens, of course, not just in the Catholic Church, but in several great Buddhist teachers that have been outed as serial exploiters. I mean, I don't want to name names.
I've been the victim of I don't love the word victim, but I've been the victim of two of those scenarios firsthand.
So here are these people who have genuinely reached deep states of spiritual awareness and realization, but who have not worked out their traumas, and therefore they inflict their traumas. They use their power and their influence to inflict their traumas on other people. And from my point of view, not that there needs to be a competition, but if somebody wants to get whole, I say do the emotional work first.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've been up to. Not to denigrate or dismiss the other, but because I think we're not complete. if you just go one way or the other. But I think the bigger danger here is that people get spiritual beliefs and practices and realizations, and they really leave their traumatized selves essentially untouched, and they're not even aware of it. So I think that's the bigger danger here.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that, we have this shared language around different parts. And I think that the compassion I can see for myself and the decade of spiritual bypassing is that I wasn't quite safe enough yet to even remember my trauma. My trauma was dissociated trauma. And so I think that the foundation of my spiritual practice actually helped me create that safety to remember. Mm-hmm. Now, upon remembering and doing the deeper work, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that deeper work is the true healing. And I thank my spiritual practice for helping me get there, but I couldn't sustain that, hit yourself, like throw yourself against the wall and then peel yourself off the wall and then pick yourself up back again with your spiritual practice. Like that wasn't sustainable for me. And so the deeper work is the greatest spiritual practice of my life.
Yeah. And from that point of view, I might say that my marriage has been the biggest spiritual work in my life,
Mm-hmm.
After 53 years, and it's ongoing. As I was telling you, I just came back from this speaking trip, and I was shocked to find how I'd lost myself in all the publicity around the book and the attention and all the speaking I was doing. And I came home and I was missing in action,
What does that look like when Gabor Maté comes back from a book tour and has been so filled up from the outside world, and you come home and what does missing in action mean? Like, what does that look like in the household?
It means that we go to a restaurant, as we did 5 days ago, with my son who's visiting from New York and my wife, and the waiter brings me the wrong kind of soup, the wrong size of soup, and I lose it. I get aggressive and critical and hostile, like that, It means that when I'm challenged, I defend myself rather than listen, So, him out there speaking with compassion and understanding and all this kind of stuff. And in Happy Days, you do describe a scene that really spoke to me, because you were on stage talking to, I don't know, thousands of people and channeling the truth and just being, authentic. Actually, you weren't faking anything. But something was flowing through you that you haven't opened to yourself quite yet. And so then your husband is just so proud of you for the beautiful job you did, and you get off the stage and you find you're missing in action,
Right.
I mean, and so I think whether you come at things from the spiritual perspective or from the emotional, psychological, trauma-informed perspective, it takes constant work and integration, because the old patterns just reassert themselves. The Buddha talked about our habit energies. And habit energies are those ingrained patterns that just automatically take over, unless we're vigilant and mindful, and unless we take care of ourselves.
How do you feel towards the part that checked out?
Dick and I are good friends, but I don't deal in parts.
Just let's not even call it a part. How do you feel about, I'm just wondering, because and I'm definitely not trying to, I'm actually just wanting to know, like, what is the feeling of being in that situation in the restaurant?
Well, when I'm in it, I'm just self-righteously hostile.
Okay. How quickly do you come out of it?
Well, because my wife could go and angry with me the next day. And,
so not until the next day? Yeah.
Well, I was sorry afterwards. I mean, I immediately got it, but the full depth of it, I didn't get, and so then how did I feel about it? I was shocked, in a really positive sense, of just shocked into realization.
Oh.
Of, my God, here I am, still capable of being that triggered and losing awareness and being really unkind toward a human being who was just trying to serve me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I at this point I don't reject those aspects of myself. I'm just curious as to what happened here. And what happened here is I got too busy and I got too focused on the outside. And
And you also might have been tired. And you might have been.
You know what? I've been up since 5 a.m. that day, and I was tired. So
yeah,
I wasn't taking care of myself. So
that's
I
it.
think,
Yeah.
so that's all that happened. So I don't go on a big self-hatred safari about it afterwards. I just, okay, what happened here? What were the conditions, and how do I take care of myself? And how do I integrate everything I know and teach?
I was in a similar situation in a nail salon. I've talked about it on the podcast where I just lost nail salon. And as by the grace of God, one of my readers was sitting next to me. Thankfully, I had come back to self before she acknowledged her presence. But yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. I just found, as shameful as it was in that moment, I found it to be such a beautiful opportunity to just use the tools and to have compassion for myself.
It always is. And I think a commonality between both ourselves and other people that we know is that we can, these experiences, they're always learning opportunities, you know?
That's right. And I really want to reflect back to you also, you know, seeing you live. I actually saw you live for the first time when we were in Florida together at the High Watch conference. And I just want you to know that the man that's on that stage is fully integrated in self and authentic self, as you would say. And it's so, just even that presence is very soothing. You spoke with so much clarity and it was direct, but it was the presence alone was enough for me. It was just everything for me.
Yes. And I'm told that. I'm glad that that's the case. You know, sometimes I'm reminded, though, of something that the great Russian dancer Nijinsky said. Do you know Nijinsky? Yeah, of him. So he was a great ballet dancer about 100 years ago, sort of the Nureyev and Baryshnikov of his day. And he would execute these amazing leaps on stage. And he was asked, how do you do it? He says, I don't do it. He says, when Nijinsky's there, it can't happen. You know?
That's right.
So that, if there's a presence, it's probably the same for you. It's both my presence and it isn't, you know? Like
yes.
Something greater than we are, I think. And this is not to aggrandize ourselves. It's actually to say that's just how it is. There's something that comes through. There's something that comes through, you know? The work actually is in making ourselves open to it.
That's exactly right. It's just releasing the blocks to the presence of that, of that truth, that energy. Also, just, I think that the idea that we're not there, I don't agree with that entirely, because I think it's a collaborative energy. It's a collaboration. It's allowing ourselves to be in our truth and allowing that truth to elevate and enhance. I see it as a collaborative effort.
It is, and it's also collaboration, not just between internally, but also there's an audience there, you know, and you know, there's, in that case, there were 2,000 people there, and they trust you, or in this case, they trust me, and there's respect there, and there's openness there, you know.
But I do understand, though, stepping aside. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so that, you know, there's that, Dan Siegel talks about this interpersonal neurobiology. Our nervous systems are hooked into, are joined with the nervous system. Everybody else is sort of all one. So they can't do it for me. They can be there and I can still show up as completely egotistical, you know, not anymore though, but I used to, you know, so they don't do it for me and I don't do it for them purely, but it is a collaboration.
Yeah. Well, they're co-regulating with your energy. It's like you can literally set the stage. And yeah, no, it's a beautiful experience to in any way be able to let energy have that kind of collaborative energy with others and particularly an audience, but even with children or with your household. Well, I want to thank you for your vulnerability and your truth. And I genuinely believe that these moments that feel like suffering or uncomfortable or going are the most important moments, because here you are, this famed teacher, author, doctor, someone who I probably a year ago would be acting like a total dork with you right now. But today, through a lot of my personal growth, I can be present with you as a friend. But that you can be in that truth and share it so openly here, just as the first topic, is the teachings, in my opinion. That's it. And I thank you for that. And, you know, I'm a sober woman of 17 years, and I want to say thank you for the commitment that you've made to addicts in helping us recognize that, as you say, the source of addiction is not to be found in the genes, but in early childhood environment. And I want to let you just riff on that, because it's been very, very helpful for me as a recovering addict, and also having respect for my addiction and my journey. And I think that those out there need to hear it from you.
Sure. So my views on addiction evolved over the years, or they emerged over the years, I should say, both in dealing with my own addictive behaviors and also working with the highly addicted population. Now, a lot of people may not be aware, but Vancouver, British Columbia, where I live, has got a district called the Downtown East Side, really a few square block radius, where we have thousands of people using drugs of all kinds. And it's just absolute misery central. You know, people are shocked when they walk down these streets, what they see. And a lot of my, I worked there for 12 years as a physician, and my patients were suffering from HIV and hepatitis C and every mental illness you could name, and heavy drug dependence as well. And they also happen to be, every single one of them, very traumatized people. And over the 12 years that I worked there, out of hundreds of women that I treated, not one of them had not been sexually abused as children.
Right.
And I know at some point you recovered some repressed memories of...
the same, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you called our mutual friend Lisa Hallerman about it, because you mentioned Lisa in the book. I figured it must have been her.
It was Elisa, yeah, that's exactly right.
And because she works in recovery. And
her book's out today, actually. Her book's out today.
Yes, and you and I have both endorsed it, I think.
Soulbriety. We'll give it a plug right now. Soulbriety.
Soulbriety, yes.
That's right.
By Lisa Hallerman. And so what emerged for me is two things that addiction is not. It's not a culpable choice anybody makes. I mean, nobody decides to be an addict. People may decide to use a drug, but whether they get addicted or not, they don't choose that. That's, there's no, I have never met anybody who woke up one morning and said, I want to be a drug addict, nor who would choose it. Now, people may choose the temporary relief that the addiction gives, but they don't choose the addiction as such. Number one. Number two, it's not an inherited disease. In fact, it's not a disease at all. And so I really resist the medical mantra and the treatment industry mantra, this is a disease. It can behave like a disease in the sense that it causes physical and mental harm. It has relapses and remissions, but that doesn't make it a disease. And what it actually is if I give you my core definition of addiction, then addiction is manifested in any behavior in which a person finds temporary pleasure or relief and therefore craves, then suffers negative consequences and has trouble giving up despite the negative consequences. So pleasure, relief, craving in the short term, harm, and difficulty giving up in the long term. And so then if I asked you as an identified formerly addicted person, and you've had addictions to substances, but also to behaviors, not what was wrong with your addiction, any one of them, I don't care which one, but what did they do for you in the short term? What did you like about them?
They gave me relief. They
Relief from,
relief from terror.
and who needs to be numbed, by the way?
Who needs to be numbed?
Yeah.
In that instance, the child parts of me.
No, I don't mean analytically. I mean, when do we need to be numbed?
Oh, when we're in pain. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, relief from terror and pain relief, are they good things or bad things in themselves?
In themselves, they're good things.
Yeah. So that's my point. The addiction wasn't your primary problem. It wasn't any kind of a disease. It was an attempt to solve a problem.
Yeah.
It was a doomed attempt to solve a problem. The problem with emotional pain. And so hence my mantra, which I lay out in this book, The Myth of Normal, as in my previous book on addiction. Don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain. And I don't care what addiction you're talking about, or anybody's talking about, whether it's cocaine, crystal meth, heroin, nicotine, caffeine, alcohol, sex, gambling, pornography, eating, shopping, self-cutting, internet, gaming. I don't care what. They're always in attempts to solve a problem of emotional distress. So again, the mantra is don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain. And if you want to understand why the pain, go back to the person's childhood. And that's where the pain was incurred, just as it was incurred in my case, just as it was incurred in your case. Sometimes the memories are available, sometimes they're repressed, sometimes they're a bit confusing, in that nothing really terrible happened, but terrible things don't need to happen, like you were sexually abused. And I was a Jewish infant separated from my mother under the Nazis in Second World War Hungary. But it doesn't have to be that bad. It can be a sensitive child not having their needs met and suffering emotional pain and being alone with it.
Yeah.
Because like even in your case, where this terrible thing happened to you, that was bad enough, but you didn't talk to anybody about it. And of course, you have a 4-year-old. If I asked you, well, if anybody even looked at your child the wrong way, who would you want them to talk to about it? You would say, me right away. So the fact that you didn't talk to your parents already means that there was trauma there even before.
Totally.
That disconnection, that separation. I'm not blaming your parents. They did their best, whatever that happened to be, given their own limitations and traumas and so on. But that being cut off from our own feelings so that we don't even ask for help, that's the trauma. And then the sexual abuse happens on top of that. But that emotional pain is always there. And that's the problem that the addiction tries to solve.
Right.
And so treating it like a disease or as a choice just misses the mark completely.
So in a sense, you'd consider it a trauma response.
It's a trauma response, and Dick Schwartz, our mutual friend, calls it a firefighter. When the pain gets too much, you just douse the fire. And the firefighters, when they come to your house to put out the fire, they'll destroy your house if they have to.
That's right.
Because they're just trying to put out the fire or make sure that the neighborhood doesn't catch on fire. So they'll break your windows, your doors, and if necessary, they'll break down your walls. And they'll, addiction does that. So addiction does a lot of harm, but it's trying to douse the fire of pain that's burning inside you and has been since childhood. So in that sense, Dick and I see it very much the same. We just use different language.
If you like this video and you want to get more Gabby, check out the next one right over here.